Okay, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel simply is Discerning What is True. Today is the 27th day of February 2026. I'm going to be reading chapter 4 by a gentleman named, well, the name of the book is called Genocide of America by John Coleman, a brilliant author. I assume he's still living as far as I know. And so we're going to be dealing with the particular chapter here, 4, that is, chapter 4. And chapter 4 is well, let me change something real quick. There we go. The magnifier, make it a little bit easier. So, who was Madame Kollontei? Kollontei, I guess is how you pronounce it. Who was Madame Alexandria Kollontei, the real author of the, quote, abortion rights, end quote, and the unseen, carefully hidden inspirer of NARL and NOW and the Marxist-Leninist socialist feminism. She, that is Madame Kollontei, is now Soviet minister to Norway after a hectic career, which included 8 husbands, 2 positions as People Commissar First, that is, Commissar of Welfare, 2 visits to the United States in 1915 and 1916. Okay, ask yourself, why is this woman here? But anyway, as a German socialist agitator, after having been deported from 3 European countries in 1914, a dangerous revolutionary. Page 9972 in the work of what we call a Senate Congressional Record from 9962 to 9977. Then a federal expose of this champion of, quote, abortion rights, end quote, was given by Representative Saul Nowski. Recently, there came to Mexico as the ambassador of the Soviet Union, one named Alexandria Kollontei. She is said to be a clever leader in the world revolutionary movement for 28 years, that she had been arrested in 3 different countries because of her efforts in 1916 and 1917. She had visited the United States, speaking from coast to coast. She was under the management of Ludwig Lohr, L-O-R-E, now a prominent communist in the United States. The object and purpose of the visit to Kollontei to the United States in 1916 and 1917 was to incite the socialists of this country and to hamper our activities if the United States entered through a system of non-resistance by what took place. In other words, they wanted us to get in a war here, so to speak, the powers that be. Alexandria Kollontei is the world's greatest exponent of, quote, free love. I don't think anybody's even heard of her, to be quite honest with you. I never heard of her, end quote. And nationalization of children. She is in Mexico for that purpose and votes no good to the people of the United States. Again, from page 4599 to page 4582 and 4604, House Congressional Record based upon February 23, 1927. So this is almost, it's another year, and it will be, guess what? It's been 100 years. These words were to prove almost prophetic. In them are found the origins of the feminist movement of the U.S., and it's clear that its leader, Bella Abzug, and Kate Mishimans and Eleanor Smear worked in the shadows of Alexandria Kollontei. Kollontei's book, called Communism and the Family, is the most violent and savage attack on marriage and the family ever written, surpassing the this decadent evil Frederick Engels, quote, The Origin of the Family, end quote. Her free love radical followers formerly called themselves the International League of Peace and Freedom. They always cover that up, don't they? They always are very smooth, didn't they? But have since undergone a lot of name changes to disguise the fact that their agenda is the same as that of Alexandria Kollontei. And today call themselves the NOW, that is the National Organization of Women, and the National Abortion Right League, end quote. So many people may say, why are you talking about this, Brant? Since this is no longer taking place, the Supreme Court is now is against abortion. Well, I think it's still important because this is history, and this ties into John Coleman's work. And anything that's written by John Coleman is very well done. He's done his research, and he's the type of person that you would want to read his books. He would. He's not what you call popular. You can get his books. You need to get his books. Okay. And you can also download them too. Also, the goals of these quote liberal feminists end quote who, if they were honest, would call themselves as socialists, are the same as socialistic communists of the 1920s. Here is exposed the origins of the clamor of now, NARL, for abortion rights. And in brackets it says free love without responsibility, end quote. They and their incendiary liberal allies in the House and Senate, in an unholy alliance with the kept control jackals of the news media, were able to dupe the Supreme Court in making its decision versus Roe versus Wade. Okay, so people say, why are you talking about Roe versus Wade's been overturned? No, we still need to know this, okay? Now would have delighted P.D. Barnum, the great circus showman, who said, quote, the American people love to be humbug, end quote. Joseph Stalin put it even more bluntly after his triumph at Yalta. Quote, this is what they think of us, okay? And the people behind them. You know, Stalin was just one of those where, you know, was a used person, so to speak, you know, just like Trump, you know. They are gullible and easily deceived by illusions, which their media are past masters at creating. We have only to change a few names here, a few names there, and they believe that these organizations no longer exist, and they will believe it. We must make the most of the gullible beliefs of the American people and their leaders. We must drop the existing communist labels and replace them with socialist ones. Which, the socialists themselves, the Fabians, what we call them, it's the middle way. You see, you have constitution on one side, you have communism, and then what you do is the part of the Hegelian dialectic. You know, you can just change this over, and then you say, well, we're socialists now. We're not so bad as the communists. You know what I'm saying? We don't kill people. You see, we want to quote unquote progress society. You see, evidently for the Marxist-Lenin feminists on a Kollontei, who ran the quote International League of Peace and Freedom, end quote, Stalin advice had merit. They became NOW and NARL under the umbrella of women's rights, and are doing a good job in humbugging so many young women whom they are grossly misleading and who are in total ignorance of the fact that abortion is not mentioned in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, nor in the rights reserved for we, the sovereign people. In this, National Organization of Women and the NARL are greatly helped by the media, who are the past masters at deceiving the American people by illusions, as Stalin so accurately observed. No part of the U.S. Constitution can be isolated from any other part. You see, it's a whole picture. It all works together. You can't pick a little piece here and just say, oh, this is what it is, and then say, well, this is what I'm saying. No, every part of the U.S. Constitution has to be read and interpreted in the light of the whole Constitution. It cannot be fragmented. To call a child in the womb a non-person is about as twisted as we can get in the Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton. Radical feminism movements are not a new thing. Marxist-Lenin, Fabian socialists nearly overcame the U.S. in 1924, and they used radical feminists to do this, and throughout the 1920s. There is nothing in the 14th Amendment that would grant abortion rights, as Justice Story and most judges, and especially those appointed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt to pack the Supreme Court, failed to constitutional interpretation. Instead, they have read their own thoughts into it, which is predilection. As Senator Sam Erwin said, they found something new in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Of course they did. You see, they make it up. You see. The cunning deceptions of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments did not fool all judges. The slaughterhouse judges poked fun at the three dishonest amendments. it may or may not be known, but in the Negro vote, Republican Party saw an opportunity to remain in power. So it cobbed the three amendments together in haste. But the amendments did not include the right, R-I-G-H-T, in parentheses, to have an abortion. The first intent of the 14th Amendment was to ensure that Confederate officers who served as state leaders, and at his level, those with the rank of colonel or higher, were debarred from serving as public officers. So anxious were the Republicans to rush the 14th Amendment through that they forgot to give the Negro the right to hold public office. This only came with the 15th Amendment. Far too much had been read into the 14th Amendment that is not in it at all. Those who have seriously studied the Reconstruction debates know that the 14th Amendment and the 15th must be taken with a large grain of salt. They are essentially not part of the U.S. Constitution. In a display of twisting and squeezing the Constitution to fit the squills of the agenda of the liberals, socialists and their supporters in Congress, that is the Warren Court, used the 14th Amendment to mean anything they wanted to mean, which added up to a rampant predilation. There is not one grain of evidence to support the Roe versus Wade decision by the Supreme Court. The 14th Amendment does not state abortion, nor is it expressly implied. Therefore, abortion as a power cannot be taken. The entire U.S. Constitution can be seen in the Fifth Amendment, that is, the protection of life, liberty, and property, and is expressly implied that life in the womb is protected. Yeah, that's also, we're supposed to have property, you see, and have liberty. Where's the liberty today, folks? Where is it? A simple way to test the legislation that made Roe versus Wade law is to see if it is found in the delegated powers of Congress, you see, or incidentally to another delegated power. On this count alone, the proposed legislation to make Roe versus Wade something other than case law completely fails. What the Supreme Court attempted to do in Roe versus Wade was to fill in between amendments, you see, which it cannot do. The Ninth Amendment was written expressly to prevent judges from filling in amendments not in the Constitution. You see, they're one of the, I want this piece put in here, then take away people's rights, you see. These piece of shits is what they are, you see. All of them, Republicans and Democrats, all of them, period. There's not a decent one in the office, folks. That's not what he says. That's what I'm saying. The U.S. Supreme people get so completely on this right and left bullshit. They're both doing the same thing, folks. They just use different language. And by the way, a lawyer is, guess what they do? They make laws. They make laws against the people. I'll say that against the people. Not for the people, but against them. Because they're bought and paid for by corporations, you see, or by bankers. The U.S. Supreme Court went outside the U.S. Constitution, Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton. These were case law decisions and not constitutional law. The U.S. Constitution cannot be made over by case law, but only by amendments ratified by all 50 states. The NOW and the NARL, I should say, knew they could never get all 50 states to ratify amendment to the Constitution to make abortion legal. So they and their incendiary liberal supporters in the House and Senate aided the illusion created by the media, fought to get abortion legalized via by the back door, in the case being the Supreme Court. Roe versus Wade is a prescription for anarchy. Anarchy is defined as the, quote, the abolition of formal government and free action for the individual. Hear that? Let's say that again. Anarchy is defined as the abolition of formal government and free action for the individual. The cry of the abortionists, quote, freedom of choice, end quote, has not to do with the Constitution, but it is an anarchist cry, you see, where in the Constitution is the right to draw the taxpayer into mass murder of babies and force them to pay for these vile murders. It is not there. Roe versus Wade, Doe versus Bolton have no force in effect in law in the states, as the Fifth Amendment fully protects both the born and the unborn child in the mother's womb. Abortion is not allowed by the U.S. Constitution and certainly not in the Fourth Amendment, in spite of what Justice Rehnquist said. Another way, the communist collectives twist and squeeze the Constitution is found in teaching by liberal law professors who try to include the preamble of the Constitution in the body of the Constitution. In fact, the preamble to the Constitution has nothing to do with the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But they basically, even that time, back then, they'd already brainwashed people in schools. Maybe we shouldn't have schools, maybe we shouldn't have them at all. I just kind of wonder, you waste, how many years do you waste in these stupid things? I mean, you could probably learn all this stuff now, that is by yourself, you see, instead of paying, people pay for all this crap, you see, tax for this. And you also, that's right, we wouldn't have all these teachers trying to program people too, you see. To make the preamble a part of the Constitution would, quote, turn it into a blank paper, end quote. To use the words of Thomas Jefferson, the Marxists, communist liberals in the House and Senate have over a 50-year period sought to overturn limit passes placed, for example, on welfare and turn the nation into a socialist welfare paradise. And now they want poor women to have abortions while on welfare. And I want to share something else here. Let me go back in here. Trying to find a thing here. I haven't found it yet. Bear with me, folks. I'm trying to find what I'm talking about. So I wanted to read a little bit about this lady, and I'm trying to find a little article I had here just a while ago. About her. She was very proficient in language, very much so. But I don't see it for some reason. I may have already closed it, the window. That irritates me. I have too many windows open is the problem. I know I opened it up. Oh, I hate this. Okay. Well, apparently I closed it up by accident, apparently. Which irritates me. But anyway, we just have to keep going on here. She was proficient in many languages. She could speak 4 different languages, if not 5. Here it is. Finally found it. Okay. She was born March 19th. Sorry, March 31st. I'm sorry, March 19th of 1872, and she passed away in the same month in 1952 on the 9th day. Was a Russian revolutionary politician, diplomat, and a Marxist theoretician. She served as People's Commissar, I should say, for welfare in Vladimir Lenin's government from 1917 to 1918. She was a highly prominent woman within the Bolshevik Party. She was the first woman in history to be a cabinet member and one of the first women to be appointed as a diplomatic representative of a modern state and the first to be promoted to the rank of an ambassador. She was an ambassador. She was the daughter of an Imperial Russian Army general, which might mean that she was well educated. She was embracing the radical politics in the 1890s and joined the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party in 1899. During the RSDLP, which is the Russian Labor Party, ideology split. She sided with Julius Marlowe, which was the Mensheviks. So there were 2 groups fighting. In fact, there were 3 groups. You had the Mensheviks, you had the communists, and you had the Bolsheviks. Okay, there were three groups. And the Mensheviks were fighting. They're supposed to be somewhat a little bit more laxer, so to speak, more socialist than they are communists, so to speak, against Lenin's Bolsheviks. Exiled from Russia in 1908, Kollontei toured Western Europe and the United States and campaigning against participants in the First World War. So she was quite active. Why was she allowed to even be in our country? You see, that's another thing. In 1915, she broke with the Mensheviks and became a member of the Bolsheviks. Following the 1917 February Revolution, which ousted the emperor, that is Constantine, not Constantine, but Nicholas II, Kollontei returned to Russia. She wasn't even there. So she supported Lenin's radical proposals and as a member of the party's Central Committee, voted for the policy of armed uprising, which led to the October Revolution and the fall of Alexander Kerensky's provisional government. Now, Kerensky was what's the word? The communists couldn't get it, and neither would the other side. So Kerensky was basically he's a bar leader, so to speak, because eventually he was a middleman, basically, and basically later he eventually is thrown out. Okay, she was appointed People's Commissar for Social Welfare in the first Soviet government, but soon resigned due to the opposition to the peace treaty of Brest-Litovsk in the ranks of the left communists. In 1919, Kollontei was a leading figure in the foundation of I never heard of this group, even though I'm taking communists. The Women's Department of the Central Committee of the All-Russian Communist Party. Bolsheviks was a section of the Russian Communist Party devoted to women's affairs in 1920. And this is spelled Zhenoldi. I'm sorry, DL. The then new Women's Department of Central Committee that was aimed at improving the status of women in the Soviet Union. She was a champion of women's liberation and later came to be recognized as a key figure in Marxist feminism. Kollontei was also outspoken against bureaucratic influences over the Communist Party and its undemocratic internal practices. To this end, she sided with the left-wing Workers' Opposition in 1920, but was eventually defeated and sidelined, narrowly avoiding her own expulsion from the party altogether. From 1922 on, she was appointed to various diplomatic posts abroad. She served in Norway, she served in Mexico, and in Sweden. This period in her life is captured in the writings of fellow plenipotentiary from Spain, as Isabel de Palencia, titled Alexander Kollontei, Ambassadors from Russia, published in 1947. In 1943, she was promoted to the title of Ambassador to Sweden. She retired from diplomatic service in 1945, and she died in Moscow in 1952. Her father was, was Don Tovich, which is really surprising. He would have had to have been serving under the Tsar. So what's going on here? Okay, kind of thinking, I don't know if she was just simply looking for a place, a position. She knew many languages. She knew she could basically do this. I don't know. I'm just speculating here. I was trying to find all the languages she spoke, but she knew many languages, 3 or 4 of them, if not more. Let's see a little bit more. She was also called growing up was close to her father, and whom she shared in an analytical bent. So she's actually somewhat would be logical and an interest in history and politics. Her relationship with her mother, for whom she was named, was more complex. She later recalled, my mother and the English nanny who reared me were demanding. There was order in everything to tidy up toys myself, to lay my underwear on a little chair at night, to wash neatly, to study my lessons on time, to treat the servants with respect. Mama demanded this. Okay, so she wanted to be her mom wanted her to be a good wife and a good mother. She didn't want nothing to do with it. Alexander was a good student growing up. She shared her father's interests in history and mastering a range of languages. She spoke French with her mother and sisters. She spoke English with her nanny. She spoke Finnish with her peasants at a family estate inherited from her maternal grandfather in Kuls, that is in parts of Finland, and was a student of German. So she could speak many languages. She was so that's why she probably was his ambassador. Alexandria also sought to continue her schooling at a university, but her mother refused her permission, arguing that women have no real need for higher education and that impressionable youngsters encounter too many dangerous radical ideas at universities. Instead, Alexandria was to be allowed to take an exam to gain a certificate of a school teacher before making her way into the society to find a husband, as was the custom. She, 1890 or 1891, Alexandria, aged around 19, met her cousin and future husband. Wow, cousin. Vladimir Lukovich Kollontei. Somewhere between July, he was born July 1867 and died in 1917, it looks like it. An engineering student of modest means, enrolled in a military institute, which was what most people did in engineering back then. And Alexander's mother objected bitterly to the potential union since the young man was so poor, to which her daughter replied that she would work as a teacher to help make ends meet. Her mother bitterly scolded at the notion. You work? You who can't even make up your own bed to look neat and tidy? You who never picked up a needle? You who go marching through the house like a princess and never help the servants with their work? You who are just like your father, going around dreaming and leaving your books on every chair and table in the house. That's what her mother said, apparently. Her parents forbade the relationship, though, and sent Alexandria on a tour of Western Europe in the hope that she would forget Vladimir. But the pair remained committed to one another despite it all and married in 1893. Alexandria became pregnant soon after her marriage and bore a son, Mikhail. In 1894, she devoted her time to reading radical populist and Marxist political literature and writing fiction. And she's pictured here in the International Socialist Congress in Copenhagen in 1910. She's actually holding a delegate. She's right here in the front. Wow. Holding a delegate's hand. Apparently she's in a white dress here. Looks like. Trying to see it, but anyway, I won't get on. I've kind of got up a little bit tangent, but I wanted to share who this person was and why she kind of fit in this position. And naturally, she was interested in history and political science. Let me see. Years later, we separated, although we're in love because I felt trapped. I was detached from Vladimir because of the revolutionary upsetting rooted in Russia, end quote. In 1898, she left little Mikhail with her parents to study economics in Zurich. So she went to Switzerland, and Professor Heinrich Herkoner, she then paid a visit to England where she met members of the British socialist movement, including, here's the key, including Cindy and Beatrice Webb. She returned to Russia in 1899, in which time she met Vladimir Lenin, better known today as Vladimir Lenin, and she became interested in Marxist ideas while studying the history of workers' movements in Zurich under Herkoner. That's spelled Herkner, later described by her as Marxist revisionist. She became a member of the Russian Social Democratic Party in 1899 at the age of 27. In 1905, she was a witness to the series of events in St. Peter's known as the Bloody Sunday. This is where the Tsarist soldiers opened fire on unarmed demonstrators in front of the Winter Palace. That's demonstrated in the movie called Dr. Zhivago. What it was called, Dr. Zhivago, the one that does a history of that, where he is looking and they're not. He's not. I don't think he's I think he's English, but anyway, and they start shooting these people unarmed. He's appalled by what's happening. At the time of the split in the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party between the Mensheviks and under Julius Marteau, and Bolsheviks under Lenin in 1903. Kollontei did not side with either faction at first and, quote, offered her services to both factions, end quote. In 1906, however, disapproving of the, quote, hostile position taken by the Bolsheviks towards the Duma, that's the government form there, so, it'd be like our Congress. And despite her being gently a left-winger, she decided to join the Mensheviks. She went into exile to Germany in 1908. This one went everywhere. After publishing Finland and Socialism, which called on the Finnish people to rise up against oppression within the Russian Empire. That's right. She traveled across Western Europe and became acquainted with certain leaders, even Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, among others. In 1911, while abruptly breaking off her long-term relationship with her faction comrade, that is Peter Maslov, from 1867, an Aquarian scientist, she started a love affair with another fellow exile, Alexandria. I'm not going to go anymore. Shepakov. Anyway, we need to get back to the book here. So, where are we at here? Hold on a second. Bear with me. I'm sorry, folks. I'm just going over through these things again. I've got too many windows, like I said. I've got so many interests here too. That's the key. I've been doing some things on dialectic information too. The history of Frankfurt School. Let's see what we got here. Oh, goodness. Okay, here we are. I'm sorry. I've just gotten all involved here. Come on now, turn the color. Move. Okay, get out of the way. To make the preamble as part of the Constitution would turn it into a blank paper, to use the words of Thomas Jefferson. The Marxist, communist, liberals in the House and Senate have, over a 50-year period, sought to overturn limits placed, for example, on welfare, and turn this nation to a socialist welfare paradise. I think I read that earlier. These incendiaries and their Eastern liberal establishment law professors have established isolated articles, that is, hold on here. Professors have especially isolated Article 1, Section 8, and Clause 1 from the balance of Sections 8. The limits on the welfare clause are found in the other part of Section 8, Article 1. It is the auxiliary clause, or Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, with the words, quote, necessary, end quote. And the next one is and proper. That defines how for the general welfare should go. So that these liberal senators do not know the Constitution is shown by the fact that 90% of them do not know what constitutes a declaration of war, nor have they the faintest idea of how to write one. That's why President G.W. Bush got away with his illegal war against Iraq. Had the Senate done its constitutional duty, Bush would have been stopped in his tracks, impeached and tried for treason, and removed from office if found guilty. What the Senate did was to interpret the Constitution by giving Bush, quote, permission, end quote, to attack Iraq, which was not a declaration of war. So they kind of got away with it, you see. kind of just get over here. See that? The House and Senate hashed up a ultra feeble substitute for a declaration of war, entirely unconstitutional and without a shred of legality. But there's no one out there who can stop this. You see, these people have been so compromised. You see. Exactly the same thing can be said about the so-called Supreme Court decision to allow abortion. The Supreme Court had no right to pass such a law any more than George W. Bush had the right to order U.S. armed forces to invade Iraq. We had the same type of total disregard for the Constitution in the AUCOIN bill, which called for taxpayers' money to be used to fund abortions for women in the armed services. The bill enlarged the gross error made by the Supreme Court in Roe v. Wade. All this was about free love bill. It's unconstitutional. Nowhere is abortion expressed in the Constitution, nor is it incidental to any other part of the Constitution. Page S, that is in SAM 10078, Congressional Record, Senate, July 18, 1991, tells more on the terrible saga of the Senate trying to push changes on Title 10. That purpose is clear. The purpose of Title 10 is not to perform abortions, not to refer for abortions, or to tout abortion. Pregnant women do not need preventive services offered by Title X. 10. These comments were made by the Senator Orrin Hatch. Here again, we have a further chapter in the tragedy of mass child murder having played out in the Senate, where certain socialist members tried to put a legal face on the crime of ripping a defenseless baby from the mother's womb, unconstitutionally murder that flies in the face of common sense. Common sense is the essence of the U.S. Constitution, and yet the Marxist-communist liberals continue to defy the traditions of common sense. The Supreme Court acted in most ridiculous and absurd manner without any common sense in purporting to make abortion legal. Common sense law is centuries old and dates back hundreds of years to the War of the Roses in England. The number of babies murdered each year approximately was 1.8 million children. As a result, the tragedy absurdity of called Roe versus Wade is greatly the number of soldiers of both armies who died during the Civil War. How can abortion be classed as common sense law springing from natural law? You can read anything by Lysander Spooner who deals with that. In fact, you just simply need to read anything by Lysander Spooner. He's just a brilliant man. He woke up. He saw the system way back in the late 1800s. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson must be whirling in their graves at the very thought of such an odious perversion. And so that will be the end of the chapter today, chapter 4. I'm sorry I went all over the place today. I'm trying to get as much done as I can. I wanted to get some more videos done today. There's a lot longer than I wanted to go to, but this is about Genocide in America by John Coleman. This was chapter 4, and I plan to do chapter 5 after I take a break here, and we'll go from there. All right. Thank you very much for being here. Have a good day. Take care.